Welcome to the Give for Grouse podcast, dedicated to giving the ruffed grouse a voice by promoting sound wildlife management, advocating for forest health, and championing all things conservation. Now let's get to the show. Cody Altizer and Eric Long.
Welcome back to the Give for Grouse podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Cody Altizer, down here in beautiful sunny Virginia. Your other host in dark gray Ohio is Eric Long.
Oh, you hit the hammer on the nail, man. It is just dark and gloomy and blah. It's just blah.
Yeah.
It's just another Ohio day, man.
It's the middle of January. I guess that is to be expected.
Yeah, we could have lots of snow and snowed in. So I'll take this damp 30, it's 40 something degrees and damp and sprinkling and blah. Yeah. But anyway.
But today is our, I don't even know what episode.
5.
Cool. 5
right?
It is. I don't know, maybe 5 or 6. I think 5. I should have double checked. Today is our first guest, which I'm excited about because the first 4 episodes we've done I thought were super. But, you and I can sit across from each other and talk about anything under the sun till we're blue in the face. But I don't really think that's going to help.
Yeah, that doesn't resonate with people.
Right, exactly.
Like, why is
as
the
much
sky
as we
blue?
may enjoy it, I don't think that's going to help us. That's not why we exist.
No.
So today we have our first guest. He is the Forest Game Bird Biologist for the state of Ohio. His name's Mark Wiley. We will get to that very soon, but a couple things to discuss before we get to that is, number one, is if you're listening to this and you would like to help the Give for Grouse initiative and the Give for Grouse podcast, one way that you can do that is to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That helps us grow. That helps the podcast grow. That helps us reach more people and spread the message further. And we are not all give. We are not all take. We are give and take. So give us a 5-star review, and in return, we will send you this little sticker for free. It's a little ruffed grouse holding his little chainsaw.
Got Give for Grouse on there.
On the bar.
On chainsaw.
Logo. On the fuel cap. So that's all you got to do. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Send us a screenshot on Instagram, Facebook, however you can get it to us to prove to us that you did. Send us a screenshot that you did, your name and address. We will get you one of these in the mail. I mean, if my worst enemy showed me this, I would still think it was pretty cool.
It is.
Objectively,
it is.
This is a pretty sweet little, little thing.
Yeah, we got other stickers too, but that one for sure is that says a lot. I love it. I get people. Right. I have it on my chainsaw helmet. I have it on my control burn helmet. We have them on our drip torches, and I was doing a control burn down in southern Ohio, a giant burn, and I had that on my burn helmet, and people are like, "Oh my God, where'd you get?" What? Yeah, it's pretty. Especially when you see it in person. It's like, this is bad.
It is super cool. It says a lot. I mean, it's, 2 things that are synonymous with each other, ruffed grouse and chainsaw, but you're advocating for this little bird. You're advocating for the logging and forestry industry. Yeah. Throw this on your truck, your helmet, anywhere. Something to be proud of. That is item number 1. Item number 2 is our billboard campaign is still going on. It still exists.
Yeah.
We are over halfway. I think almost 60% of the goal. We're trying to raise $10,000. We're shy of $6,000. I don't know where in the 5s we are, but we're steadily making progress. HabitatVA.org is the website. Please, if you are able to make a donation, and don't for a second think it has to be a big one, $5, $10, $20. It helps us fund this billboard that has a ruffed grouse that says logging equals healthy forests, healthy wildlife. No different than this sticker. A donation supports the ruffed grouse. It supports a logger. It supports a rural community who, in my case, the Allegheny Highlands, but, maybe where you're from, you're supporting a rural community that was in Appalachia was more than likely built by the timber industry. So if you're able, we would appreciate any donation that you would be able to send us.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I don't want. I'm glad you brought that up because I don't want people thinking it's either completed or by the wayside. We're moving on. No, that's still an ongoing thing, and maybe we'll put some more promotional stuff out there to get people to donate and what have you. But yeah, to the Husqvarna users, we apologize. We went with the.
We weren't inclusive. I didn't think of
Yeah, I
that.
know. See,
We need
you
a
gotta be
husky, an
inclusive.
echo.
I don't want it because now it's not. It's a complete horse. It's not
Oh,
complete
yeah.
horse now.
I never once thought about that.
Yeah.
funny.
Way to go, Cody. No wonder no one's donating to the billboard. All the Husqvarna people are like, you know what? Out.
Well, we did not consider their
We
representation.
did not consider the brand of saw. Well, still, they should make a big donation. Right?
Maybe
Reason
one day.
we chose that saw accidentally, but yeah, we chose that saw. Yeah, we'll expect a check. We'll take whatever donation you want as
Yes,
a company.
sir.
No, we have, as you mentioned, we have Mark Wiley with the Ohio Division of Wildlife. He is, as Cody mentioned, the Forest Game Biologist, Forest Game Upland Biologist. He wears multiple hats. That's for sure. When you work for Division of Wildlife, you have one specific title, but you are a person of many. That's how we get things done, accomplished, and stuff like that. But or they do. But yeah, no, this is going to be a good conversation. I had Mark. So, I drug him, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. I drug him into the grouse log and got in the blind. And of course, I'll wait till the story is told what happened. But no, very passionate fella. I've heard him speak at Woodcock Society banquets and stuff. He's well spoken, a very impressive individual for sure. The Division of Wildlife is blessed to have someone like that that's passionate for sure, and it's a good communicator. When you talk to him, you can see the wheels turning. He's just not spewing out stuff he thinks of before he talks and stuff. Unlike myself, I just spew it out and go, "Well, I shouldn't have said that." But no, looking forward to this conversation for sure.
Yeah. No, I'm excited. Like I said, with the first few episodes were just you and I, and I'm sure there will be plenty more in the future where we just sit and shoot the SHIT, but to really educate you and I,
Right.
not just everybody listening, but the more we know, the better, and we're not going to learn but so much from just you and I getting biologists and foresters. And we've mentioned that up until now, that's why we exist. And that's what this podcast is about. So it officially starts today with Mr. Mark Wiley. All right. Today we have on Mr. Mark Wiley, the Forest Game Bird Biologist from Eric's homeland, great state of Ohio. Mark, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, Cody. It's a pleasure to be with you guys.
Excellent.
Yeah, I have the privilege of working with Mark with the Division of Wildlife, and it's been a minute. And Mark is, and I'm not saying this because he's on our podcast, but there are a few. There's a lot of great biologists within the state of Ohio, and Mark is one of the good ones. He works hard. He's always approachable. He's always a phone call away, and does pick up his phone. And you never get the answer that you want from Mark, but that's not the point today. But no,
I appreciate that, Eric.
No, I'm getting with you. No, Mark is definitely one of the good ones, and what have you. So again, thank you for coming on.
Yes.
You're our first guest, man. Our first guest.
That is a privilege and an honor, and I will do my best to live up to your expectations, Eric.
There you go. There you go.
No, we're excited to have you on, Mark. I mean, we started this podcast. We're not very old. We're a few episodes in, and the first few were really just Eric and I sitting across from each other, ping ponging back and forth. But really, the meat of this podcast is having biologists, guys like yourself on, foresters who can really, because Eric and I mean, we know grouse and in forest management, but we're not professionals to the extent that guys like you are and other guests that we'll have on. So, the meat of this podcast is to really unpack ruffed grouse, forest management, and, get to the nitty gritty of it, because as we've learned, there's not a lot of information out there that we have seen. And that's what the Gift for Grouse initiative exists to do, is to prop up guys like yourself, communicate that information, talk about grouse, how they're doing, what they're doing, and what we can do to give them the best future possible. But before we get into this episode, if you could give us the quick and dirty Reader's Digest, as much or as little you want to share about Mark Wiley professionally and personally.
Yeah, sure. I'm a native Ohioan. I grew up in West Central Ohio in our more agricultural area. So forest management, for me, growing up on a row crop farm was basically how far into the woodlot can we plant corn and soybeans without wrecking equipment. So I didn't grow up in a sort of with a forest interest or background. When I came to the Division of Wildlife, I sort of specialized in grassland and farmland game, pheasants and quail specifically. So again, more of a farmland background. And then in about 2017, I shifted over into the turkey and grouse world as the Forest Game Bird Biologist. So it's been a learning experience over the past 7-8 years to sort of try to absorb everything I can in forest management. But the principles of managing game birds are very much the same between what I grew up in farmland game and grassland game birds and our forest game. So there's benefit to that. But as I mentioned, I've probably got a lot to learn from you two in forest management. I look forward to the conversation there in sort of the direct management activities and how they impact these birds.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No.
What species, like, what are you in charge of? You mentioned turkeys, obviously grouse. What other species of wildlife?
So principally turkeys, grouse, and American woodcock. But we kind of, like all of us, Eric, it's sort of other duties as assigned, and a lot falls into that. So some of our other forest game, like squirrel, there's a few other small game species that we don't really have a dedicated biologist, and the small amount of monitoring that we do, whether it's population monitoring where we're out doing surveys to try to get an estimate of abundance or distribution, or if it's harvest monitoring, and that's a big part of what we do with the Division of Wildlife is also harvest monitoring and trying to ensure that the regulations we've got, the seasons we have in place, are appropriate for those species and their populations. So yeah, it's and when I can, I try to listen in on conversations about pheasants and quail still, because that's again, that's where I cut my teeth. That's what I grew up with, chasing those birds. So I've still got a lot of passion for some of those farmland and grassland game.
Yeah, it was funny because last year I've been for a couple of years, maybe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark. I was like, I want to get you into the grouse blind with me. You got to see this grouse that jumps on the log I bet you about February he'll be there, almost start every day and what have you. So finally we got it together. Mark's schedule, again, is very busy and stuff. So with work and family, and I finally all right, he was on the log quite a bit. It's like, oh no, dude, we can set our watch to it. He's going to be on that log. Mark drove all that way. We met, drove to the site, got in the blind. And you think that thing showed up, you would be incorrect. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Oh, I was so frustrated. But we had good conversations and stuff, learned about each other and what have you. But yeah, it was so. And then another gentleman was Jeff Saltzman with the Woodcock Society up in Northeast Ohio. Same thing. You set your watch to the grouse getting on the log, and he drove all the way from Cleveland area and stuff. And it's like, come on, didn't show up as well. So, but yeah. Mark, as always, I'm always sending him and head of wildlife management and another gentleman, a mutual friend, pictures of the grouse on the log. And I usually joke around with them, like, why don't you care about me and stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah. And stuff like that. We have a good time back and forth with the text thread. But No,
I didn't mention this to you, Eric, because I really wanted to see that grouse, but I'm convinced I might just have terrible luck when it comes to seeing drummers. I've tried in the past during spring turkey season where I've identified some active logs, and I thought, I'll get out there and I'll watch this bird drum a little bit on a spring turkey hunt. I think I'm not on strike 3. I'm like on strike 12, trying to see these drummers. So
yeah, well,
but I really appreciate it. It's
we got to get you back this year. We got to get you back
Sure.
this year. So he's probably 15 years old. He doesn't have enough strength to drum, but he's doing it. I did the same thing with Cody. It was Cody came up all the way from Virginia, and we sat in a blind, right, Cody? And it was a bad weather day though. But
well, I went with you. I was going to say, Mark, don't feel bad because I went with Eric 2 or 3 times. Blind and haven't seen him. So it's
never showed up. It's like what the deal? I go in there and it's like I'm falling asleep because he's drumming so much, But yeah, it's funny. But anyway, so Mark, let's just get this rolling here. What is the status of the ruffed grouse in the state of Ohio?
Well, unfortunately, it's not great. Most of our population indices, whether that's the drumming index, the number of drummers we detect, Division of Wildlife staff detect on roadside counts, or flush rates from our volunteer hunters who contribute hunting information, they're all at historic lows. We're reaching the point where we're happy if we detect a few grouse. With the small amount of effort that we can put out on roadside efforts and roadside routes and those sorts of things. So it's not an exhaustive effort search for grouse. We could probably find them that way if we had the resources. But just the standard surveys, we're at near historic lows for the last several years. That is a trend that's been happening for about 3 decades now. We reached a peak in ruffed grouse abundance in the 1970s, going into the early 80s. That peak was the result of widespread forest restoration that occurred decades prior in southeast and eastern Ohio. Forest clearing was rampant in the late 1800s, early 1900s. About a third of the state was reforested. And for a period, it was in excellent grouse habitat, talking about the 50s, 60s, 70s, 1950s, or 60s and 1970s. And we experienced this boom in grouse numbers, superabundance almost. And since that time, much of that forest habitat has matured beyond its utility for grouse. You guys are well aware they're a young forest species. They need that high stem density, even shrubby cover. I know, Cody, in some of the previous episodes, I've been really happy to hear you emphasize the value of shrubs and soft mass species. That's lacking in a lot of Ohio's forested areas that are really mature stands that, as I mentioned, just don't have the value to grouse that they once did decades ago. So we've seen this gradual decline in grouse numbers through those decades. That was another speed bump along the way was the arrival of West Nile virus in the early 2000s. We can see a little bit of a impact there in our grouse indices. So I don't point the blame at something like West Nile virus, but it certainly didn't help.
Yeah,
we were on a downward trend, and that sort of expedited that decline or sped it up possibly a little bit. So at the point we are now, we have pockets of grouse remaining through eastern and parts of southern Ohio, with the best numbers in southeast Ohio, where we've got the most expansive forest areas, and particularly where you'll find these pockets of grouse are large public forest areas or areas of forest in public management, state ownership largely. And particularly I'll applaud the ODNR division of forestry, because some of those areas where they've got very active forest management, they're heavily invested in forest health, forest management, timber products. That goes hand in hand with creating grouse habitat. So some of our largest state forests are where you'll have the best chance of hearing a drummer, you'll have the best chance of flushing a grouse. But again, we're nowhere near what we used to be. I sometimes hear people say the term or refer to them as recreationally extinct. They're on the landscape, but they're at numbers below what a hunter would like. They're at numbers below what a bird watcher would like. They're hard to find, difficult to locate, but they're persisting. They're persisting on the landscape. It is impressive. It's a difference that I see certainly in grouse and say northern bobwhite, where it seemed like with northern bobwhite further west in Ohio in the agricultural areas, when they would reach these really, really low abundances, they would inevitably blink out in just a few years. They just couldn't persist once populations reached these really low levels. Grouse, for whatever reason, seemed to hang on. And your bird, Eric, is a great example of that. It's there may be more going on than you realize on that property, but for whatever reason, these grouse seem to be able to hang on. It may be they travel greater distances and find these patches. It may just be their survival is better, they're longer lived. But I have been impressed in recent years to find that we're seeing evidence of grouse at very low abundance in lots of areas across eastern Ohio where we've got predominantly forest cover and we've got enough forest management action happening that you can find that grouse cover.
Yeah. Now, you said recreational. What was the term?
Recreationally extinct. Yeah.
So, man, we got to remember that. We're going to steal that. I appreciate that. Anyway, no, it's with that being said, I didn't have any intentions on heading down this road here, but and don't answer the question you don't want to, but well-intentioned people, and I want to emphasize that enough because you only know what you know and what have you, but they're well-intentioned on shrinking the bag limit or closing seasons down. And I know states like Indiana, they did that, and then people lost. What's the word I'm looking for? The value of the species went down, and therefore it's really in bad shape. And I know recently, Ohio, we limited we did a limit of the counties and stuff and what have you. But what's your thoughts on all that?
Yeah. I mean, at the stage we are now, and we don't know it all. We don't know everything about the bird's biology. We don't know everything about the impacts of hunting and harvest. But what we have seen through the ACGRP, which I've heard you guys talk about too, the large-scale Appalachian study that included multiple states, all focused on ruffed grouse biology, movement, habitat use, survival, impacts of harvest, was negligible impact of hunter harvest, meaning the hunter harvest was at such a low level that it wasn't impacting population growth or trend, at least that we could measure. Now, of course, that's nearly 20 years ago now, I think. So much may have changed, but a big change we've seen in Ohio is we've lost grouse hunters, and grouse hunters are hunting in Ohio less. They're harvesting fewer birds. In 2023, which was our last estimate of grouse harvest in the state of Ohio, we estimated that 100 birds were taken, 100 to 150. Very small number. And that's largely because hunters are not going to continue to pursue a bird if they've got to hunt for 8 to 10 hours per flush. they're going to seek up better opportunities elsewhere. So getting back to your question, hunting restrictions, while they may be appropriate in some cases, as you see populations decline, they're not going to have positive impact on the population, because the hunting harvest is happening at such a low level that those birds that may have been spared due to a hunting restriction, closure of a county, or complete season closure, there's not enough of them to really move the needle at all. Yeah. So while I completely understand the need for, or the desire, I should say, for hunting restrictions in some cases, and often those can be appropriate. We may reach that point in Ohio at some point. But the caveat that I'll give to that is, do not hold your breath for a big positive swing in grouse numbers on the heels of cessation of grouse hunting, because we're not going to see it. And to your point, Eric, about the closed counties, that happened recently in just the past few years. So for your listeners, you can hunt grouse in some Ohio counties, and in others, the hunting season is now closed. We are not seeing, positive population trends in those closed counties at this point. And that is because the grouse issue, the issues that grouse face in Ohio, hunting pressure is not even on the list. It's habitat. It's a habitat driven change at a landscape scale. And then to a degree, it's this additional pressure placed on those birds by disease, West Nile virus.
Okay.
One question I want to ask you, Mark, because one thing that you mentioned earlier that I thought was encouraging, you said where grouse are doing really well is on state land, which I think, and I don't want to speak incorrectly for Virginia, I think is kind of the inverse down here, because, you mentioned it to make the biggest possible impact, habitat has to be implemented on a landscape scale. Like, if I have 300 acres of private land that I can have phenomenal habitat, but the surrounding 10,000 may be terrible, so I can't influence but so much change. So I thought it was really encouraging that, that the Department of Forestry in Ohio is doing such good work where grouse are doing well. It's kind of, there's a correlation between that. What other positives do you see? Reference grouse, and you can keep it, secular to those areas where they are doing well. But are there any other positive trends or observations you're seeing reference grouse and grouse management in the state of Ohio?
There may be a few, and I should add, there are areas in Ohio of predominantly private land ownership where I'm certain there are pockets of grouse. I wanted to add that in case you had a listener out there that goes, has been working their tail off, and has seen in the right places where grouse are, and has seen positive influence. And from the state agency's perspective, we don't know every corner of the state. We don't know what's happening, on each individual property. Of course, we know that there are private lands that are managed in a way that's beneficial to grouse. The challenge, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, Cody, is most of our land ownership is fairly small relative to the needs of a ruffed grouse population. So a landowner that has 150 to 200 acres, maybe more, maybe less, they might be able to provide a small piece of what a grouse population needs. Now, maybe they have a home range or two of a drumming male or a female that is solely contained in their property. But again, I'm talking about at a population level. You need more than just a couple of grouse for a population. And so at that point, we're talking about thousands of acres, if not tens of thousands of acres. And so when you get into landscapes at that scale, you're largely talking about places that are in public ownership. And the other challenge is not all landowners, but most landowners don't have sort of the mentality of rotational cutting or harvest or disturbance. It's not on their radar. It's not that they're necessarily opposed to it or they're not interested in it. It's just not on their radar that, hey, for the greatest wildlife benefit of this forest patch that I have the ability to impact, I should every 5 years, every 10 years, every 15 years, I should be doing something. I should be creating some of that successional habitat that's going to quickly age out. I mean, that's one of the real challenges of managing for grouse is, at least in our system in Ohio, oak hickory largely, you start to see the benefits. Let's start with a clear cut. You start to see the real value for grouse at around 5 years. They might use that cut earlier, but the cover isn't going to be what those grouse really need until about 5 years. It's going to start to age out at 10 to 15, meaning it's going to start to open up and be over mature. Again, grouse will still use it. I find active drumming logs in stands that are older than 15 years. But when I'm in there, I'm looking around going, boy, there's a lot of open avenues for an avian predator to nail this bird on this log, because it's so mature now. When, we're at 18 years, 20 years after harvest. So anyway, you've got this moving window, and it's very narrow, from 5 to 15 years. And if you're not constantly adding new patches in close proximity, a quarter mile, half mile, whatever it needs to be, within the movement distance of a grouse, you're creating you're not giving those birds what they need, what that population needs to sustain itself through the year. So in private land management, if you have even just a 20-25 year period where landowners are like, nah, we're not going to do any shelter woods. We're not going to do any cutting. I'm not interested in that. I like this open look of my forest, or I'm managing for something else. I know, Cody, you've got specific interest in deer. I often bring up to people one of the best properties I've ever seen in Ohio for grouse habitat, and they had grouse on it, Northeast Ohio. They were managing for deer. Mm-hmm. Like their management strategy was, we want deer, we want more deer, we want bigger deer. And they were cutting because they wanted bedding areas and browse. And they created exactly, if you look at, Ohio's sort of grouse habitat management recipe book from decades ago, research done in Southeast Ohio, it's frequent cutting every, 5 to 10 years, small patches, and close proximity to one another, creating that sort of checkerboard effect. And that's exactly what these people were doing, but they were doing it because they wanted deer. So anyway, there are the positives that you mentioned. I kind of already touched on the big one, I guess, for me, is that these birds are resilient. Although they're not abundant in Ohio to any stretch, they hold on and they show up in places where you don't always expect it. Now, at the same time, the "if you build it, they will come" message has kind of come around to bite us with some species like ruffed grouse and northern bobwhite quail is another example. Is if you don't have birds nearby, you can create wonderful habitat that is not occupied by those birds. So if there aren't birds in your township, if there aren't birds already in your county, in some cases, unfortunately in Ohio, we've probably got some counties where ruffed grouse were historically present and no longer are. You could do tremendous amounts of habitat work and not have these birds show up. But the flip side of that is, as I mentioned, we've still got birds, observations of grouse, reports of drummers all across eastern Ohio, the historic range of ruffed grouse in the state. So I don't know what it'll take to create a landscape that can support grouse in the numbers that people want, that I know Eric wants, that I'd like to see, that our grouse hunters want to see. It'll take a major shift, But the good news is we've still got those birds on the landscape. I don't ever want to get to a point where we may think or believe that grouse are actually extirpated, and our only hope would be translocation from another state. The prospects for that are very low. The success rates are not great. So I want to hold on to the birds that we've still got.
Gotcha. One question. Sorry, Eric. It's a question for both of you. I'm pretty sure I could answer Eric's version of it verbatim. But you mentioned, some of the best habitat are from deer hunters. One thing that's interesting for me, because I deer hunt with Eric up in Ohio, and then hear stories, and I've got eyes on it from down here. The deer hunting culture in Ohio is very different from West Virginia. It's very interesting to me and fascinating. It's pretty cool. The deer hunting culture in Ohio, and I'm curious. Both of you guys are both settling in. What do you guys think the deer hunting culture's impact is on ruffed grouse across the state in Ohio? Because, from my experience, it's a lot of people are kind of opposed to hunting because they don't want to. Even a clear cut, it's 2 steps back for a step forward. They don't want to do the clear cut, even though they may know the long term benefits, because they don't want to, mess up their deer hunting right now, because they know where deer bed, they know where they feed, and they don't want to make that sacrifice. It seems a lot of deer hunting in Ohio is based around box blinds and corn piles. That is not, obviously, as we know, forest management. You can kill some really nice deer, some really big deer, and have your hunting goals accomplished and satisfied by hunting that way. And habitat becomes less of a priority to killing deer, killing your big buck, and a corn pile can certainly help that. So, whoever wants to answer first, but best you can. What do you guys think the deer hunting culture in Ohio has on ruffed grouse?
Go ahead, Mark, if you want to.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Eric, because I was gonna have to punt to you anyway.
Okay, I can.
In part, I'll explain my personal experience deer hunting is solely in West Central Ohio, where family farm is. Know all the neighbors, properties like that. So we're hunting an agricultural landscape, fence rows, and small woodlots. And generally there are just too darn many deer for us. And so harvesting deer is not a problem. Of course, if you're after that big buck that Cody mentioned, you're going to have to pass on an awful lot of deer through the season. You're going to have to watch a lot of deer walk by. But for me, it was always just fill the freezer, which generally happened pretty quickly. In my area, I don't know many people that manage habitat specifically for deer because they're doing so well. It's row crop agriculture. There's plenty for them to eat. As long as they've got a few woodlots to hide in, they do just fine. So I won't have much to say about the deer hunting culture in Ohio because I'm not as seeped in it as maybe Eric is. Now, one thing I will say that I bring up to a lot of grouse hunters, deer hunters alike, is something that when this topic comes up of the overlap of grouse and habitat and deer habitat management, is there are just a couple of grouse management areas in the state of Ohio managed by our ODNR Division of Forestry. So sister division to our Division of Wildlife, but they're specifically in forest management and timber management of timber products. Those grouse management areas, if you look at the plans when they were set up in the 50s and 60s, they were grouse and deer management areas. And they had checkerboard, clear-cut plans. Every 10 years, we're going to cut in these different patches. And it was laid out for 100 years or so. And those are still in operation. You can go to them today and find recent clear cuts and 20-year-old clear cuts and 30-year-old clear cuts. But the original plans for those were for the benefit of ruffed grouse and white-tailed deer. Now, I think we just kind of dropped deer off the name of those areas because we've found that deer do so well everywhere that now they're sort of informally just referred to as our grouse management areas. But their history was grouse and deer. And the prescription, the habitat prescription, the forest management prescription was exactly the same at that time. So, Eric, I'll let you fill in all the gaps I left, I guess.
Yeah, actually, Cody, it's a very good question. You think it'd be a simple answer, and I could answer it probably the way that you think I would answer it, but I'm not going to, because you could pick, like, there are outliers, like Mark was saying up in Northeast Ohio, that managing for deer and the response to the grouse has been really good. Or you could pick on the deer hunting community being a negative impact on it because of deer numbers and the stuff, the browse that's consumed. You could pick on them, reference, the baiting issue and not trapping the property on top if you're baiting your property, because your influx of predators that baiting can accumulate. Raccoons, for example, I see pictures of 20 raccoons on one feeder. Someone will send to me and go, why, they're not even addressing the issue, and those go out there and have negative impacts on turkey populations, woodcock, etc. So there are things that you could pick on about, but that's a conversation for another day. I think the one thing that is that I will focus on in this aspect of it is the fight, meaning what I mean by that is that deer hunters tend to be, and I'm throwing a blanket over everybody, of course. They're one species oriented. Okay, so meaning they're concentrating all their efforts into deer management, and they get very passionate about what goes on their property, what goes on into the community. QDM co-ops are formed. They're very passionate group of sportsmen. But when you're being one species oriented, I get frustrated. Like, where's that fight when it comes to the ruffed grouse? Like, you're very passionate about chronic wasting disease and what the states like Ohio, what are they doing? They're very, because again, you only know what you know. So you're very passionate. You watch this influencer, they're against CWD, the management aspect of way. And then you watch some in Dr. Grant Woods, for example, who does an excellent explanation of why CWD is an issue. But the thing about it is that they're passionate about chronic wasting disease. EHD, we had EHD in 2025, major hit. Actually, it got to the point where the state restricted bag limits in certain counties. So the sportsmen were really passionate pushing that issue when it comes to white-tailed deer. Again, it's a result of being one species oriented. And I think it's frustrating when you talk to people about ruffed grouse and that there is not that fight. There isn't that passion, that it's just, you're so close to being there. We could help move the needle if you were just that passionate about other species like the ruffed grouse that actually impact the white-tailed deer, population. You're so close. You just, again, you only know what you know. And that's what's frustrating with the deer hunt community, is that you have passion. You will fight for what you believe in when it comes to a species, but it's just blinders, and that's what's frustrating with again, you could pick on a whole bunch of other stuff or the positive aspect of things, but when it comes to ruffed grouse, trying to answer that question, is that the lack of education on other things, what could be. Like, we should not be having this issue. I'm listening to Mark talk and I'm about ready to jump off a bridge. It's just like, hey, thanks, Mark. You know what I mean? It's like, and we gotta, we'll start heading in the direction of the truth hurts, right? The uncomfortable truth, everybody needs to hear this, because pick a state. We're going to be interviewing somebody from Virginia, and it's going to be almost the same thing to a certain degree. You can pick Pennsylvania, you can pick, Vermont. It's going to be the same thing. but we need to know the truth before we can fix the situation and stuff like that. But no, there's a lot to, I'm starting to ramble here, but it's
No, you
that's a
bring
very
up
good question, Cody.
you bring up really great points, Eric, and I've heard you guys talk about this on earlier episodes, and it's great. Is you scale it all the way back. It's not just let's go make a clear cut for rough grouse. It's let's educate landowners, or let's bring in foresters that make decisions that are best for those landowners, that help make decisions that are best for those landowners and meeting their goals, specifically in forest management. And then it's let's make the right decisions for those management activities, whether it's a clear cut, a timber harvest, TSI, whatever it is that's appropriate to meet the goals for that landowner. And then it's let's support local industry for timber products. And I've heard you guys mention, buying furniture made from local trees. That's phenomenal. I mean, if there's not a market for those trees, then there's not good incentive for landowners to even worry about managing for profitable timber, healthy forests. And so for sure, maybe they have wildlife interests, but Eric, to your point, everybody's interests are varied. It may be deer, it may be turkey, it may be bald eagles, it may be rough grouse. But something we can all come together collectively is we'd like to see healthy forests. We'd like to see native species in those healthy forests. We'd like to see those managed in a way that's beneficial to our landowners, because ultimately that's what's going to have to happen. We can't just say, the few people in Ohio or whatever state that are interested in abundant grouse numbers, they don't carry enough weight to shift the tide. We estimate there are maybe 3,000 grouse hunters in the state of Ohio. Half of those are probably incidental hunters. Maybe they're chasing rabbits and they fire at a grouse if they flush one. And then when they get our survey, they say, yeah, I hunted grouse. So the number of grouse hunters, the number of passionate grouse enthusiasts in the state is declining, just as the number of grouse are. The positive side of that, I really don't want to make you jump off the bridge, Eric, and I've heard that before. Unfortunately, when I talk about quail, when I talk about grouse, pheasants, people go, Mark, boy, you're really depressing.
God, I can only imagine what he tells his kids. You're not good enough at volleyball. Just stay home. You know what I mean? You're wasting my time. You're wasting the coach's time. You're wasting everybody's time.
It's a delicate balance between optimism, reality. Yeah. But I mean, the silver lining there is, just as we talked about, deer hunters, we need to do a better job helping deer hunters recognize that these actions that we're advocating for rough grouse are beneficial to deer. They create these patches that deer use for either bedding or browse or fawning or whatever the case might be. They're beneficial for deer. They're beneficial for turkey. Now turkey aren't going to be in that 10-year-old clear cut that's so dense they can't fit through the stems. But in those early years, they're going to nest in those areas. They're going to brood in those areas. We're seeing that now with a GPS telemetry study on wild turkey hens. They're going to shelter wood cuts with their 3-day-old broods, and they're picking bugs, and they're just setting up shop in there for 2 weeks while they try to get these young turkey poults to a flighted stage and where they're more mobile, and then they can move through more mature forest, more typical turkey habitat. So the turkey hunters should be on board with this style of grouse management, grouse habitat management. Deer hunters should be on board with us. We should all be collectively rowing in the same direction. And I think I've heard you guys convey that message before, and I hope it's one that catches on.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, because it's almost to the point where it kind of goes back to Cody's question and what you just said. It's Cody and I preach about it. It's changing the narrative, controlling the narrative. I know the foresters that I deal with, in state and private aspect of it. If you were to tell, like Cody Altizer was to hire ex-forester from Ohio, one of the good ones, and said, hey, I want deer management on my place. So Cody knows what he needs to do as a forester to manage what the person needs, is their goals. But if someone was to say to Cody, being the forester, I want grouse, that forester knows what to do. They know the difference between grouse management, wood cut. That's my point. I kind of butchered all that, but a good forester knows what type of grouse cut needs to happen versus deer versus grouse. Okay, they're educated on that. They have to be, to keep up with the times and what have you. But it's wording, it's narrative, putting that narrative out there. It's just a simple thing. Like, maybe I'm being a little bit too dramatic, and correct me if I'm wrong. It's funny how just several words could change this is a big word, Cody, trajectory of nice. A species. You like that? I know. I pulled that out of my ass. But anyway, of grouse. Like, it's, instead of saying deer, I say grouse for my forester to come into my property. And as a deer manager, I'm educated enough because of YouTube and consultants and all this stuff. You can take a grouse cut and mold it into what you want, versus a deer cut, which you're going to be doing more management a little bit later. But it's just a simple words could change the future. Am I being a little bit too dramatic on that or not? I mean, it's to me, listening to this, it's like controlling the narrative, putting the narrative out there. Instead of saying deer to a forester, say grouse. It's just a little extra,
No.
Am I wrong?
And no, I don't think you're wrong. And that can have tremendous impact on buy-in from a landowner, from a public land manager. What are their specific interests? You may very well have a landowner who's not interested in wildlife at all, but is interested in timber value. And there's still a lot of actions that forester can recommend on their property that are going to be beneficial to turkey, grouse, deer, songbirds, forest wildlife across the board. But the management action is specifically focused on timber value. When I was a graduate student working on northern bobwhite in Southwest Ohio, a mentor of mine was an avid grouse hunter, he was a grouse hunter too, but he was an avid bobwhite hunter. And he would talk about knocking on doors to go bobwhite hunting across Southwest Ohio. And he had two things in the vehicle with him. He had a Bible and a bottle of whiskey, and he knew which one to bring to the door for which landowners to get hunting permission. And he said every once in a while you have a landowner you're supposed to bring both. And I'm just emphasizing the point that we all different things catch our interest. We may be interested in deer, we may be interested in grouse or turkey or timber, or whatever the case might be. But in general, healthy forests and healthy forest management will get us there. You're talking about throwing the blanket over the deer hunters. That same blanket, for the most part, covers the rest of us too. There's subtle differences. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's a really good point. And that, Eric, you've mentioned it, in a couple of the episodes that we've done. It's, peel the deer management label off and you can put grouse management. Well, even you can peel that label off if it's not applicable to you, and just managing for a healthy forest ecosystem should be goal number one. Maybe grouse management number two, or, wherever your priorities lie under a healthy forest. That should be the goal for anybody, because a healthy forest can support grouse, deer, turkey, any wildlife species, but it can also, a healthy forest can be productive from a timber value perspective as well. If you're the odd person out there that doesn't care about wildlife for whatever reason, and, you're looking for maximum timber production, a healthy forest, can check that box as well. Well, one question I did want to ask you, Mark, and this is kind of our first gotcha question, and it segues from a lot of, from the point you just made or this current discussion is, it's a simple question, and take as much time as you need. I suppose there's a wrong answer. It's a very personal question, I think, to answer. I think everybody's answer will be different, is what I'm trying to say. But how would you define a healthy forest? What does a healthy forest look like to you?
A healthy forest is predominantly native species. I would love to say entirely, but that's an impossibility at this point.
Yep.
The threat of invasive species cannot be understated. With a reasonable mix of ages, structures, species, classes. So a mosaic of, if you're familiar with forest stand maps, I'd like to see a patchwork of different forest types appropriate for topography, terrain, hydrology, the natural forest system. And then within that, a similar mosaic of age class, because that's how we get the structural difference. That's how we get, the patches that are of value to various wildlife species in different life stages. So the young forests that we talk about being so important for grouse, that's their drumming area. That provides the cover for brooding in many cases. Might not necessarily be their nesting area. They'll nest outside of those young forest patches. But those are the winter stands where they've got cover when the foliage is off, they're exposed, but they've still got high stem density to keep those avian predators at bay. But then songbirds during the summer, our migratory songbirds are using those areas for brood rearing as well. So bringing we have evidence that they're bringing their fledglings to those areas because you've got high invertebrate abundance. They're foraging within those young forest stands. I mentioned the value to wild turkey. Sure, you see wild turkey in mature stands, and wild turkey they're a visual animal. They like to be able to see. It's one of their key predator evasion techniques. I want good line of sight so that I can see things coming before they get close enough to pounce. But we are absolutely seeing these wild turkey hens take broods to these forest openings where you've got dense understory growth. And that's where they're brood rearing, they're picking invertebrates. They've got cover before those poults are flighted. So to get back to it, I don't know if you phrased it as a perfect forest stand or an ideal forest stand. It's that mosaic. It's a mosaic of native species, soft mass, abundant soft mass, massed, abundant hard mast as well, because those are providing wildlife foods at different times of the year. And as the ACGRP showed us, not only is young forest a challenge within the Appalachian region, just having sufficient young forest for ruffed grouse, but clearly food resources might be limiting in some regions of Appalachia, more so than what we see in the northern Great Lakes states, where quaking aspen provides pretty much everything grouse need. I don't mean to downplay the difficulty of managing grouse in northern states and provinces, but the abundance of quaking aspen and the fact that they can be cut at such a short rotation, and the catkins buds all provide tremendous ruffed grouse food resources on top of excellent cover. We don't have that benefit in the Appalachian region. And I bring that up because there are a lot of misconceptions, misperceptions about grouse management. One of the most frustrating I hear is, well, Michigan has abundant grouse. Ohio's no different. Why don't we?
Yeah.
And that is completely false. And that is a complete misrepresentation of the two different states, their landscape. I mean, just the amount of forest cover, the differences between Ohio and some of its neighbors to the north and to the east, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Virginia, the amount of forest cover that Ohio has compared to those is considerably lower. But a distinct difference occurs between the Appalachian region and the northern Great Lakes that are dominated by that quaking aspen.
Kind of pivot just a little bit. If I got to word this correctly where you don't get in trouble, Mark. I want to say if Mark was in charge, but I'm not going to say that. What do you see that needs to happen? How about that? Like, okay, you're in charge you're in charge. What does the state need to do? What's the Ruffed Grouse Society need to do? What other chapters of those grouse societies need to do in the states like Ohio where we're on the brink? Like, what do we need to do? Is it more social media influence? Is it more, promoting logging? I mean, what is it? I don't want to put words in your mouth. Like, if you were to turn this ship around, like, what needs to happen?
Oh boy, Eric. I don't want to. No, I've got answers. I've just got to decide whether I'm going to disappoint you again or cause you more distress. So I'll ask maybe for some more clarification on your question. Am I just the guy in charge with all the limited powers that the folks in charge have? I mean, I think all of us recognize, whether you're a political leader or an agency leader, there are things that you can do in those positions with the powers and responsibilities of those positions, but that might not be sufficient to change the tide in Ruffed Grouse, is I guess where I'm headed. If you were going to give me a magic wand, and what would I change? I would try to bring back some form of timber industry to Ohio, something where it becomes profitable. It is in the landowner's interest to manage their forest stands.
Yeah.
Because that's basically, it was a socioeconomic change that created the boom of grouse in the 70s. It was the same for pheasants and quail, only on the agricultural side. When the major land use practices that landowners employ are in line with the benefit, what is needed for those wildlife species, they're going to flourish. The boom of grouse was not a victory of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources in the 70s. I mean, it was basically Ohio landowners making land use decisions based on economics and just patterns of land management at the time, and it happened to be really good for grouse. Unfortunately, in recent decades, it's been the counter to that. Most of the land use practices and decisions that we make have not been beneficial for grouse. Smaller parcel sizes, broken up landscapes, fragmented landscapes, lack of disturbance and active forest management, so lack of young forest habitat. So if I wanted to make a change that I thought would really shift the needle for Ruffed Grouse, it would be, I'd love to see a timber industry, a more vibrant timber industry in eastern Ohio, southern Ohio. That's what it would take to shift the needle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's actually a great answer, because that's what Cody and I are we're working on that, and there's only two people. I want people to understand it's so quick, especially like deer podcast and stuff like that. Not picking on them, but I'm just using them as an example. It's so quick to turn to the point of figure to your state agency. They're to blame. And You have to understand people, and we, the state agencies throughout the country, sometimes they're limited on what they can say and what they can't say, and because of politics and what have you. But you have to understand what they're dealing with, and chime in, Mark, please, to help me prove the point. You have responsibility, not you specifically, but a state agency throughout the country, from the smallest wildlife species, Allegheny wood rat, all the way up to walleye in Lake Erie. That's a lot of species in between that they are responsible for. And there's only so many Mark Wileys. There's only so many Mike Reynolds. There's only so many, ex-biologists and Lyle Fendricks and stuff like that are doing what they can with what they have, right? The old Theodore Roosevelt motto. But it's so quick to blame. But sometimes we have to look ourselves in the mirror, and we can't necessarily blame ourselves because times change. It's easier to go to IKEA versus going to Amish country and buying some very expensive furniture that will last forever. The Gen X, millennial generations, they're not buying that stuff. That's antique stuff, even if it's new. I want that in my house. But again, it's so quick to blame your state agency for a situation like the Ruffed Grouse, and it's not, because as you pointed out, it's such a bigger picture. This is not white-tailed deer, the problems that they're going through. It's night and day difference. Would you agree that it's a bigger picture, because something like furniture dictates, or paper, Cody's part of the world is a paper mill. You take that paper mill out of the equation, grouse populations are going to suffer. We don't have that in Ohio anymore, so we turn to furniture and stuff like that. What dictates? So it is a bigger picture, and it's so easy to blame. But people have to understand it's not black and white when it comes to managing, in this case, Ohio's wildlife. It's not. And I'm not saying that because I work for them or you work for them and stuff like that. It's not easy. There's many steps and a lot of hoops that you have to go through to do a simple project, right or wrong. But with that being said, what do you need? Like, what does Mark Wiley need to make your job easier? I know that's a really broad question, and I don't know if Cody was ready for that either, but it's like, what do you need? What's that?
I said I wasn't, but great question.
Okay, yeah. But what do you need to make your life easier? Like, what could Gift for Grouse initiative do for Mark Wiley and the Ruffed Grouse in the state of Ohio?
Sure. And to answer that, before I answer that, I guess I'll go back to your previous statement, Eric, and I'll just add some numbers to it. That's what they pay us biologists for, is just to add numbers to things that should probably already be common sense for most folks. Is the scale at which Ohio has seen change in habitat, and that's socioeconomic driven change. That's changes from, agriculture to abandoned farm to now forest land. And that's changes from, land that was managed for timber for whatever reason, whether it was our charcoal furnaces or, decades ago, or and now it's recreational forest land, or it's backyards in Southeast Ohio, whatever the case might be. If you look at FIA data, Forest Inventory Analysis data. I don't know if the U.S. Forest Service or USDA collects that. I forget exactly, but you can find that's publicly available for most states. In Ohio, in 1968, so just ahead of the peak of ruffed grouse abundance in the state of Ohio, we had 3.7 million acres of small diameter forest. So 3.7 million acres of young forest right before the peak of ruffed grouse in the state. Today, or at least the most recent estimate, which I think is 2017, 2018, we're at just over 800,000 acres of young forest. So that is a shift of nearly 3 million acres of just young forest, not even talking about total forest acres. That is just a shift in young forest, a loss of 3 million acres. Ohio has only approximately 8 million acres total forested. So that was nearly half of Ohio's forested acres we lost over the last, 50 years. So that, to put that to scale, Department of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources divisions of forestry and wildlife together collectively. I don't know if you know the exact number, Eric. I don't know if I do, but maybe 300, 400,000 acres total land ownership. That's changed recently. Wildlife has had some large acquisitions in recent years that may have boosted that number, but a few 100,000 acres total land ownership. So when I get those calls, and I get them too, is, well, the ODNR is not doing enough for ruffed grouse. ODNR doesn't own enough land that if we turned every acre of ODNR land into young forest, that we would be at the level we were at in the 60s and 70s. I mean, we can't impact that level of acreage, the level of acreage that would bring us back to what we once had. So that's important. So what do we need? Sorry to take that side road, but yeah, what do we need? I'll be completely honest with you here, and I know you're looking for a more direct answer. I think what we need, what is most important at this point, is for folks to be aware and knowledgeable and to care. Because I think whether we're talking about bobwhites or we're talking about ruffed grouse, or name the wildlife species that may be slowly disappearing from our landscape, the greatest threat we may have is indifference to that. So in the agricultural landscape, there's a generation of people who remember having bobwhites in their backyards or in the back 40 or whatever the case might be, and remember the whistle and miss it and long for it. And maybe that memory would drive them, when they become landowners, to take some action if they knew what to do and if it was reasonable. Same with ruffed grouse. Is how many people have you talked to, and most of us are getting gray hair at this point, that really remember being in the woods and hearing ruffed grouse drum. Now, again, I'm speaking for Ohio, where that's becoming an increasingly rare thing to hear ruffed grouse drumming while you're mushroom hunting, while you're turkey hunting, while you're just out and about, out fishing, whatever the case might be. My fear is we're going to reach a point where so few people even recognize that drum or remember it or long for it that, who cares, if we do grouse management. So it's that indifference that worries me the most. So I'm really glad to hear you guys advocating for ruffed grouse management, to hear your passion for ruffed grouse, beyond just flush rate. Because I get plenty of that. Is I want to go back to flushing a grouse an hour or 2 grouse an hour, or whatever the case might be. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. I completely understand that sentiment. But beyond that, it's just, I want to be in the woods and hear a grouse. I want to be in the woods and have one scare me to death, as I'm walking down the trail and it flushes out next to me. It's an iconic part of the Appalachian forest system, and we don't want to lose it. Again, I don't know that I answered the question in the way that you wanted it.
Actually, you answered it the way I was hoping that you would. That gives me hope, Mark.
Good.
That you're looking at it at a bigger scale.
Yeah.
Other than, hey, I need. What was those things that we used on the property last year?
Yeah. If you wanted me to say we need more equipment, recorders to detect grouse, or we need, we need another chainsaw or two. That is, I mean, those things are great.
Yeah.
And they can be great tools for an agency to use in the effort. But the bigger fight is just, we need people to understand that there's an issue. We need people to understand, and I've heard you say it, Eric. We know the why. We know it. Yeah. We know why it's happening. Mm-hmm. How do we how do we change it is the $1 million question. And that's a big, again, we kind of know how it could change, but the levers that would have to be pulled are big ones. We can't pull them alone. But there are things we can do. There are small steps we can make toward the larger goal. Absolutely. So yeah, it's this. I don't mean to downplay or underemphasize the value of small contributions to wildlife areas or forest areas for cuts, or to help buy equipment for wildlife managers to do what they need to do. But if you were asking me, what do we really need? We need people that are
advocating. We need people advocating.
We need people that are voters, landowners, that become wildlife professionals or decision makers. We need them to care about whether we've got ruffed grouse on the landscape or not.
Man, love it. Love it. Love it.
That was really good stuff.
Yeah, right there. So all I heard from today is so far is there's no grouse. Mark will be unemployed here soon. And
it's a running joke. Yeah.
That's right. I hope you like Allegheny wood rats. I mentioned them earlier. Hopefully you better educate yourself on those a little bit more, Mark.
Yep.
Oh, you have turkeys, yeah, but they're obviously struggling as well. You're doing a fine job, Mark.
Yeah, that is the running joke. Is if we ever have a species that we have an overabundance, hand it to the game bird guy. He'll bump them down.
The walleye, there's been more walleye in Lake Erie than ever historically, and Mark goes, "Oh, hold my beer." Right.
Right.
That's right. We have zebra mussels like never before. What the hell's going on?
Sure.
Oh, shoot. I'm joking, of course. But, yeah, I don't know. Cody, man, we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I mean, like Eric said, I'm glad you answered it that way, Mark, because
I did, yeah.
The solution is black and white, and it's easy for us to shout it from the armchair quarterbacks and say, we got to cut, clear cut, got to log, this, that, and the other. That absolutely is part of it. But we need to, like we've discussed, people need to understand that to make real change, it has to be at a landscape scale. It's a very nuanced problem with very nuanced solutions. Like you said, we can advocate for cutting, but where are we taking the wood? Where's that wood going? The forest product industry drives a lot of those decisions, but it really, not to dumb it down too much or to sound too dramatic, but it literally starts with just caring, and apathy is a very scary emotion that we're trending towards. I feel like, or a lot of people are already there where they don't, like Eric said, you only know what you know. Some people, they don't care about grouse. You don't have to. But when the majority gets to the point where they've forgotten about grouse, or they forgot what the drumming sounds like, or they haven't flushed one, then you get to the point where it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, and you don't care what happens, and you focus on other species or other priorities. And, that's part of what Eric and I are trying to do, is to put 10 toes in the sand and draw a line and, stop the wave from crashing best we can, and getting people to care is a big part of it. So, you guys have joked about Mark being pessimistic or doom and gloom or whatever. But, another question that I wanted to ask you, Mark, that we'll ask everybody moving forward, as we can wrap this up or keep it going. But for some positive news, what is your most meaningful or your most memorable experience with a ruffed grouse? Spring morning when you heard one drum, you flushed one, anything that comes to mind, that if somebody asked you, what's your most meaningful experience, your most memorable time shared with a ruffed grouse, what would that be?
Sure. Yeah. I was quickly trying to come up with something in Ohio, and I have a handful, but most of them are just encounters or so forth. But to honestly answer your question, it's the first grouse I harvested in Michigan. And I was with that same mentor I mentioned, the fella that would act, pursue landowner permissions with his Bible and his bottle of bourbon. Again, a mentor of mine. He took me on my first trip to Michigan, really pursuing grouse where they are abundant. And we hunted hard for several days, had several shots, several opportunities. And just didn't bring one down. We were on our last morning. We were driving home that day, and we were honestly on our way to the truck and ready to just call it quits. And a bird got up right between us, and he was famously quick on the trigger. And somehow I outdrew him. I get the feeling he probably gave me a half-second chance, which I greatly appreciate. But I downed that bird right between us, and I drove us all the way home with smiling grinning ear to ear. It was amazing. It was and the company that I had, again, a mentor of mine that got me into bird dogs. So at that point I was hooked. I mean, that's that moment. And Eric talked about going to see the drummer. I've not yet had the opportunity to sit 20 feet from a drummer and watch him go, but I'm confident I'll have that same adrenaline rush, that same feeling where you just realize deep down in your bones, this is important, and this is amazing. And how has this been happening in the woods all around us? And we don't all the time go out and see this happen. I had that with sharp-tail grouse. I never give a thought to prairie grouse. I don't pursue them out west or anything like that. But I had at a meeting out west, I had a biologist say, "Hey, do you want to go see some sharp-tails display?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I thought we're going to be in a blind, with a spotting scope, staring at them from 200 yards away. And he pulled the truck right up to the lek, and we watched these, dozen birds doing their thing. And I don't want to seem like Eric. I don't want to seem too dramatic. It's life changing. I mean, it's for somebody that's as passionate about wildlife as I am, as we are, to sort of open up that door and see into their lives and see the display. Eric, you got to get me back out on that drumming log. That's basically the case I'm trying to make. Yeah.
No, I was listening to you. And I was like, in my thoughts listening, it's easy to get very emotional, because of overly passionate about what's going on. And it's a flaw. My priority is to get that to happen. You are person number one over everybody to get in that blind and watch that. I will move heaven and earth if I have to get a decoy and put some wings on it. Make it fly. Why are you pulling that string? Don't look at the string.
Yeah.
Flapping. It is going to be priority number one to get you in that blind.
Sure.
And I'm just gonna no camera, no nothing, and when it steps on that log, and I can tell when it's going to do its thing. By watching it so many years and so many hours in a blind, I can tell. I'm just going to turn to you and watch that reaction. And Cody mentioned in the last podcast, he answered his own question there and said that, and I forgot about it, that he was actually leaning against the log that the grouse was on. And could you imagine if that thing did drum with the grouse? I mean, he's leaning against the log. I would have to step up my game, get a ghillie suit, have to catch my grouse, hold it, and take a selfie with it to outdo Cody on that. Look what I got. But almost four. Screw you, bud. Top this. But could you imagine? That's the thing. It's just, because it is life changing. I've said it, and I don't want to keep going on. I know you're busy, Mark. It is life changing, and I would love to get every single person I would love to take everybody But the people that are decision makers put them in that blind and they get to feel it. It's not just hearing it. It's not seeing the wind from the wing, the suction on the mayapple move, or the leaves roll from it, which is so powerful. You after you watch this thing, you see these little things that you miss because of the spectacle. But to feel it, it's like that first time you heard that turkey spit and drum, when you got the gun up and that thing is, and you're like, what in the hell is that? You feel it. Like, I can feel that in my chest. It is life changing. That's that's when you become a turkey hunter. Like when you first hear that. And I think decisions we would turn this around like that if you could witness it. I really do. There's more to it than that, obviously, but you would be very more proactive to promoting logging. You would be more proactive of making decisions if you was to be able to do what Cody and I get to do. Blessed to have the ability to witness that stuff whenever we want, really, in the springtime. So, yeah. But
I agree. I don't want to. I can echo what you guys say because it is life changing. Eric found his bird, 4 or 5 years ago now?
No, actually, we were talking about that the other day. I think I found the log 6-7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But
it took
filming
me a couple after the fact to find mine. So I'd always watched Eric's footage, and I've heard grouse drumming, and I've seen grouse, but I had never had that experience to sit right in front of the drumming log until I had found mine and was lucky enough to get in front of one. And it is exactly that. Again, not to sensationalize it, but until you can hear them, you can watch videos of them, but until you literally feel it, 5-10 yards away, you can describe it, and you really can't establish that deep of a connection with it until you feel that. And then even prior to that, I was all in on grouse and passionate about the species, but until two things actually, until I felt it, and that was 2 springs ago. That lit a fire under me. This past spring of 25, I had grouse that for whatever reason they weren't drumming. And then that was the other side of the coin. It's like, God, I can't imagine a life without it. So I got that needle to the vein in 2024. I was injected with that drug, and then 2025 it was taken away. I was like, I literally can't imagine a spring where I'm not hearing these birds drum on the mountain or having the opportunity to sit in front of them. So that, the fire was lit in 24, and then last year, not hearing them, even though they were there, just poured gasoline on it, and I've just been fanning it ever since. So you guys are spot on. It literally is life-changing.
Yeah. Last question, Mark, because I know you're busy. It's a tough question to ask because it's an awkward type of question. What would you like to see us? I'm just pulling this out of the air. What do you like to see us continue to do or focus on as Give for Grouse? I mean, as a professional, the situation obviously with the Ruffed Grouse. What would you love for us to either continue, double down on, stay away from? I'm asking because you are a professional, you know what you're talking about, you know what you're doing. I mean, because we don't want to waste energy going down roads that are not the right decision, but we're blinded by that specific goal or whatever.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, based on our conversation today, based on the episodes I've watched of you guys, I think I'm thrilled to see the message that you're conveying. Mm-hmm. I guess the challenge is, how do we get it out to more people? And boy, how do you figure that out? Every state agency, every NGO, every podcaster has got that same. How do we get the message out to more people? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Keep at it. Unless you guys are willing to line up people by the hundreds to those drumming logs and just start working them.
Just
I told Eric that he and I should be tree poachers.
Yeah, the grouse have shifts. Like I got the morning shift.
Right. Yeah. So it's just that's the $1 million question. The mystery is how do we get this message out? How do we get people to understand? Even if they're not going to be as passionate about these things as we are, because everybody's passionate about different things. But I think broadly, and Cody said this, most people care about wildlife. Most, if you were just to survey people, they say, yeah, I care about wildlife. I want there to be wildlife. I want there to be healthy wildlife populations. I like seeing, even if I'm not a hiker, I like knowing they're out there. I like seeing wildlife occasionally when I am in those areas. But how do we take that to the next step and get people on board with the actions that need to take place, either in forest management or wildlife management or whatever the case might be? How do we get people? How do we? One big one is how do we dispel some of the misunderstanding or misperception about forest management action and its impact on wildlife, because that is a big one, and I know you guys have talked about it, and that's a constant conversation, and especially in management of grouse or other young forest species. Is how do you help people understand the actions that are taking place that seem detrimental to someone? I'm going to be polite here and just say someone maybe unfamiliar with the needs of forest wildlife species. How do you help them understand that, no, this is actually a good thing? This clear cut is still forest. It is still a forest patch. It's just at age 0. You bring them back to that place in 3 years and they will be amazed at the habitat,
Lights
the
and
vegetation,
sound.
everything, the wildlife activity that is there. Unfortunately, I think folks that are adamantly opposed to that type of forest management activity, they do a great job at showing the worst of it, the destruction, the seemingly destructive process that can be a timber harvest. That's a brief moment in time followed by 100 years of a forest stand regrowing and supporting wildlife at various stages. So getting back to it, I'm wondering, what are the important things? It's getting the message out, which you guys are already doing, and I think your message is appropriate, and it touches on all the right things, but then helping to dispel some of those misunderstandings. That's the most polite way I can put it. Is it's a misunderstanding about the system and the vegetation and the wildlife around timber management.
Wouldn't it be just easier if I gave you a chainsaw, some chaff? I mean, that seems like a big order. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I feel like I could go down and get a chainsaw donated for you. I mean,
you're making me
a lot easier, Mark.
You're making me chuckle. I had an old. These always stick out in my memory, but I had I'm going to assume he was older. I don't know. Most of the grouse hunters in Ohio that I talked to, they cut their teeth in the 70s during the abundance, and now they're of advanced age, many of them, and they often will call with suggestions. And you made me chuckle there because I recall one phone call from an Ohio grouse hunter, and he basically said, You dummies are overthinking this. He said, just give everybody a chainsaw and tell them to cut as many trees as they can, and everything will be fine. And I just thought, boy, Maybe.
Yeah.
It sure sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Just say how many deaths are we gonna have? Number one.
Right.
Yeah.
Just, here's your chainsaw. Go cut as much as you can. It's we got to plan it out a little bit more than that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, Mark, I will wrap this up. Like, again, I know we've said it like at least 3 times already. You're a busy man. Appreciate you so much taking the time, to do this. And I'm sure, Cody will have some words too, I'm sure, but we are a phone call away, brother. You need something, you let us know. You have an idea that would help us out even more than, hey, we need something. Like, I was driving down the road and I thought of this. Text it to me, man. I mean, whatever. Sure. Yeah. So appreciate you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Just to kind of echo what Eric said, very grateful. Really appreciate you coming on. I thought it was super.
This was a good one.
But also, like Eric said, that's we exist to help guys like yourself, state agencies, organizations. We're kind of our own little entity. We don't have to watch what we say or watch what we do as much as some other people. So. That gives us a lot of flexibility and a lot of creativity and how we can get work done. Like Eric said, if you have an idea, shoot it over to us and we will do whatever we can within our means to make it happen. As long as it moves the needle for ruffed grouse and forest management, that is what we exist for.
Yeah.
Sure. Great. It's been my pleasure, guys.
Absolutely. Yep. You take care. Have a good one, Mark.
Yes, you too. Thanks, Mark.
I don't know about you, but if you listen to that podcast, first of all, thank you, Mark, for taking time out of your busy schedule to do that. It's easy to listen to that and go, oh boy, we got lots of work. But if you listen to it, if you have the opportunity to listen to it again, there was a lot of positives. There's a lot of things to work on that we're so close, right? Yeah. I mean, wouldn't you agree? We're so close. This is like almost the first attempt, and that's premature to say. It's not the right thing to say. But it's like we're dabbing into this narrative, like for the first time with people. Like this had not been talked about. Like we need a log, we need to do this, we need to do that. This is like the first time I think people are going to hear this, this message. And Mark did such a great job of helping us,
Yeah.
Get this needle. You and I keep saying that. Move this needle up, for sure.
Yeah, no, I didn't know Mark. Obviously, you knew him and have worked with him, and you've told me about him. But I'd never talked to him prior to this call, so I had no expectation. But the podcast conversation exceeded my expectations. It's
oh my gosh.
With what we're doing, I think it's, and I've thought about this. I haven't really shared it with you, but I mean. If you were to ask somebody, just as you asked Mark, how do we fix this problem? Like the easy robotic answer is say, we got to cut, we got to log. Like, well, yeah, but
yeah,
if only it were that simple, Right,
so
it was refreshing to hear when you asked Mark, I forget how you worded the question, but his answer was to care. And that's part of what we've tried to communicate is establishing that connection with the species, with the forest, with the land. And, like I said, apathy I can speak to it with some personal experience, not to get too sidetracked as a Florida Gator football fan, because we're really bad right now and have been for a long time. 10 years ago when we first started to trend downward, I was spitting mad when we'd lose a game. Now it's almost expected, certain games. And I can kind of take it or leave it. I was thinking about that during the podcast. So we're kind of in that place now with grouse when maybe 10 years ago when you started to notice a decline, you were spitting mad about it. But we're 10 years into it now and people were out of sight, out of mind, focused on other things. And apathy is a very, very scary place to be. It's a dangerous emotion. So the fact that he said that, first we gotta care, we gotta advocate, we gotta fight, we gotta voice our opinions, vote the right way. I noticed he said that was all really refreshing to how he answered that question because the robotic answer would say, oh, we gotta cut, we gotta log. Yeah, but it ain't that simple.
That to me, that part of the whole podcast, man, that put a big smile on my heart because he sees the bigger picture. When you have someone say of that position and that stature, say that instead of like what you're saying, man, that gives me like, hey, we're not going to let this thing die because he does care. To say that publicly and stuff like that, and because he could have took the easy way.
Yeah.
Man, that says a lot about Mark and says a lot about the future, hopefully in Ohio, So, but yeah, it's not doom and gloom. It's not. Not on our watch. I don't care. We need to hear the truth to fix it.
Right.
Right. I don't want no sugarcoating. I want you to look in our eyes and say, and because that's what Mark did. It's like the future is. I need to hear that.
I appreciated him saying that too.
Oh, no.
Honestly, because again, somebody from his position, you would almost. I wouldn't have been surprised at all if he would have given, I don't know, the politically correct answer of the coach speak after, oh, we're working hard, we're doing the right things.
The Cleveland Browns speech, yes.
Exactly.
You guys did good.
Yeah, we lost by 40, but we gave it our darndest. I halfway expected him to say that, and it would have been fine if he did, but I appreciated the honesty for sure, because we all need to hear it.
Yeah, for sure. So, no, thanks to Mark. Thanks to taking the time out of his busy schedule. And I know we have the upcoming podcast. We have some more great guests, and I'm looking forward to the next one, which we'll see who that is, right?
Mark set the bar high, so
he set it real high. Yeah. So, as my grandpa always used to say, no hurry, no worry,